Hey everybody, Dave here. Today we're going to be talking about Blue Prism stage logging and session logging. It's a really important aspect for any organization to get right from the start. You don't have to have it completely perfect, but you need to have a good policy on your stage logging. It's kind of one of those problems where you can get it wrong at first, and it might not be a big deal until eventually you find yourself with your database completely full of session logs, and now your database doesn't work anymore. There's two aspects to this. On one side, you want to not overlog your stages so that your session logs get completely full. But on the other hand, you don't want to underlog because then you might not have enough information to properly troubleshoot in production support. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video, is how do you set your stage logging, and then what are some best practices when doing so. Let's start by looking at what defaults are set for the stage logging. You should be aware that this is going to be different based upon what Blue Prism version you have. So I'm going to go create a process, and we're just going to call this stage logging process. Next, open process. And then I'm going to go create an object. Let's call this one stage logging object. Okay, so we have both the process and the object open. I'm just going to make them look the same here. There's a difference between different Blue Prism versions as far as the defaults go, and a difference between processes and objects. In Blue Prism version 7.3.1, which is what I'm using right now, this is the defaults. In the object, every single stage type, doesn't matter what it is going to be by default set to stage logging disabled, which is a good thing. In the process, most of the stages will by default be set to errors only, like this. And then there are 4 stage types that don't work that way in the process. So there's the decision, the choice, the note stage, and the exception stage. Decision stages get set to enabled. Same thing for choice, note, and exception stages. If it's different for you in your current environment, you should absolutely go check this right now. If you're unsure, go open up Blue Prism and see what the defaults are when you drag it over. Fair chance that you are going to open like a calculation stage and you'll see that it's set to enabled or something like that. I can't remember which ones in older versions were by default set to enabled. And I think that the current way they have it set up here, like I just showed you, this is good. This is a good starting point. There are a couple of other things to be aware of, like collections and loops and stuff, but this is a good guideline as far as individual stage logging. So if you were in an older version of Blue Prism, make sure that you were checking to see whether or not it matches what I just showed you here. If it does not match, you're going to need to go up and do edit all stages set to log errors only in the process, and then the object go up and do edit all stages and disable logging. Now let's look at the 4 ways that you can change stage logging in Blue Prism. The first way is through just directly opening up a particular stage in Process Studio or Object Studio. And then look on the bottom left, and you'll see stage logging right here, and there's a drop down next to it. Your 3 options are enabled, disabled, and errors only. Enabled means that the stage is going to be logged to the session log every single time that stage is run. So if it's run 10 times, it will be 10 lines in the session log. If it's run 1,000 times, 1,000 lines in the session log for that one stage. Also, there's disabled. If you set to disabled, then for the most part, that particular stage will never be logged to the session log. Now, the last setting for stage logging is errors only. This means that if your stage runs and it successfully completes and goes to the next stage, then you will not get a line in the session log. If it has some kind of error, like you divide by 0, or it's an action stage that tries to call an API and an error bubbles up out of that. Or if you try to access a field that doesn't exist in a collection, whatever that stage is, if you have that stage set to errors only, that's going to be logged to the session log whenever that error occurs. And if no error occurs, then of course it's not going to log to the session log. So I'm going to change this. Let's say I have this calculation stage and I want to change it. I could go to disabled. And let's say that I want to change this decision stage from enabled to errors only. Now I've changed these 2. The other way that I can change these is using the menu up here. You go to edit, and then you have the option to use selected stages or all stages. So I'm going to select both of these stages. I'm going to hit edit and then go down, and you can see now this was, it was like grayed out before, and now I can actually do something with it because I have some stages selected. I can go over and choose one of the same options I had before, except this time it's going to change the logging for both of them at once. So I'll set them both to, let's say, enable logging, because I think they were both set to the other two. And now I can open these up and you'll see that they're set to stage logging enabled and stage logging enabled. Then there's also all stages. So let's say that I have an entire process or entire object that I want to change. I can go up to edit, and then I can do all stages and set everything to enable logging or everything to disable logging. And you'll see that I didn't have anything selected, right? But I'll open up those same ones that I showed before. And while they were enabled, now they're disabled, both of them. Okay, so that's pretty simple. When you do this, right, all stages, this is only affecting the process that you have open right here. If you had multiple subpages and you have stages inside of here, okay, so this is set to stage logging enabled, and then I can go to the main page, edit all stages, and set to disable logging. Go to page 1 and into the stage that's in this subpage, and you'll see the stage logging updated. So doing all stages is not just everything on this page. I will point out this too, that you can select a stage on one page. You can click over to another one, select over there as well. I held Control and left clicked each of those times. So now if I click back and forth, you can see that I have 2 stages selected. Between these two, I can go up and change these to log, let's see, what are they right now? These are disabled. Yeah, both of them are disabled. So I'm going to select this, hold Control, left click, go up to edit, and change selected stages to log errors only. And you'll see that both of them, errors only, go to the subpage, errors only. So you've got some flexibility there. It's pretty good. Same thing for objects. You can do that across different actions. Those are the 2 ways that you can change stage logging inside of Process Studio or Object Studio. There are 2 more ways, and I'm not going to necessarily show you doing this. I'm just going to show you where one of them is. Let's go over to the main window for Blue Prism, over to the System tab, and I'm not actually going to change the logging because I don't want to deal with that, and I think you should just never do it. So if you have access to this part of Blue Prism, System tab, Resources, Management, you can go to a particular resource, a runtime resource. Say you have 15 different ones here. You can select one of them and change the logging level to key stages, which will be certain ones like decision stages and stuff like that, or all stages, which will be everything, or errors only, which is what it sounds like. It's kind of like going in and setting everything to errors only. Now, on one hand, this is actually like, it makes a lot of sense. It's like, oh, I can change this to errors only, and that way I don't get a ton of logging. And then if I ever have an issue, I can go back to what the developer said by setting it to default. And whatever the developer built into the process to log, then that's what will get logged here. That makes sense to me. What doesn't make sense to me is these key stages and all stages. It's like a cool idea, but have you ever done that? Like, just try it. I just encourage you, just try it sometime. It's going to blow your mind. You're going to be like, why in the world is this a setting? I would agree with you. It makes absolutely no sense. Someone was sleeping on the job at Blue Prism that day when they put this feature in. I don't know. That's my little soapbox, and now I'm going to step off of it. Anyway, so just don't ever change this. That's my encouragement to you. Never change this. The last way that I want to point out that you can change stage logging is, I'm going to show you this. Let me actually just briefly show you how easy this is. You can go in and copy like a decision stage and go into something like Notepad++ or Notepad. You can paste it, and it's going to look like this. It's just XML. I have a plugin called XML Tools in this that I got through Plugins Admin. I'm going to go down and do Pretty Print Indent Attributes, and that's how I got things to look like this. So now I'm going to point out okay, here we go. Log inhibit is a part of the XML that tells Blue Prism, hey, you should not log this stage. And then let me go over to here. This has other examples. Log inhibit on success true. This is the same thing as errors only. So, and then log inhibit parameters. This is the same thing as if you go into, let's see, an action stage, you'll see at the bottom, stage logging, don't log parameters on this stage. I guess I haven't gone over that in this video yet, but it's pretty simple. You just check the box and any inputs and output parameters will not be logged. So that's what that's referring to. So I just wanted to point out that this is here, and this is something that like you could use. I've seen, like for my friends at Digital Workforce, at DWF, they made a tool in Excel that will manipulate the Blue Prism logging of a particular process or a release file. And they just have it editing the XML. I haven't even looked at how it's designed, but I imagine what it's doing is looping over all of the different elements, all the different nodes, and based upon different conditions, it will either turn on or turn off the logging and stuff like that, including inputting in the inhibit parameters based upon what you're looking for. And it's pretty cool. It works really well. And that's a common thing we use. Now, I'm not going to show that on screen because that's a whole nother video of itself, I think. And it's something that I'd have to figure out myself as well. But I just wanted to point out, you do have this option. If you're good at programming and you want to do some XML manipulation, you could build yourself a tool that will edit the logging of processes and objects. So that's an option there for you. That's kind of the fourth way that I'm saying you could edit the logging. Let's talk about the most important best practices. We're going to go with 3 best practices. First, avoid logging multi-row collections. You want to check, start stages, end stages, check any action stages you're using. You want to make sure that you're making use of don't log parameters on this stage. You want to just everywhere that you can, anywhere that it's possible for a collection to get logged, you want to turn off the logging for that. I don't know, let's say you have 1,500 rows, and then you pass that from the main page to a subpage. Now, I'm not saying you should do that, okay? Just to be clear, I'm not saying that's a good practice, but you like inputs and output parameters, right? So let's say you pass the collection in. Technically, it should work. As long as Blue Prism doesn't totally run out of memory, that's supposed to work. But what you're going to find is that that's going to log 1,500 rows to the session log. It's going to log every single bit of data in that entire collection. That's the first best practice. Don't log collections to the session log, and I'm going to show you what it looks like so that you can know how to watch out for it. And what you want to do is basically do some testing, immediately check your session log. Oh, I'm logging collections. Go turn that session logging off, and then go back and test it again until you find a clean session log. The second one is that you want to avoid logging in loops. So an example of a loop would be something like this. If I have a calculation stage and do my anchor here, and let's say I have a decision like this. All right, so let's say that I have, maybe I'm incrementing a counter, and here I'm checking the counter. There's no infinite loop going on. It's just going to go over here and increment until eventually it gets to a certain point. Well, this is a loop, okay? Another loop is something like this, okay? So you're looping over a collection. And anything you do inside of this loop, you want to avoid logging. So this should be set to something like errors only, or even disabled. But it's at the process level, errors only should probably do it. And then same thing here. You'd want it to be set to errors only or disabled, just depending on what you need. And same thing for the decision stage. So in this example, remember the default for a decision stage is set to stage logging enabled, which means that by my dragging this on here and putting it in this loop, or I could even put it down here too, right? Drag a decision into the collection looping. And now these two are going to get logged every single time they run. They're going to go into the session log. If I loop over a collection of 1,500 items, this is going to put 1,500 rows into the session log every time that this loops from beginning to end. That can grow massively. And it's pretty obvious typically whenever you see that in the session log. I'll show you what that looks like. It's kind of easy to find, but you do kind of have to look over your session logs on purpose. And then the last best practice I'll give you is, this one's a little more generic, but start with Blue Prism's suggested logging, which is it lines up with what we talked about earlier. In the object, you just want to disable all logging. In the process, you want to disable all logging except for decision stages and choice stages, note stages, and exception stages, but don't log any of those if they are inside of a loop like this or a loop like this. So those are my 3 best practices. I think that it will serve you really well. That we're not done. I'm still going to show you kind of causing and avoiding those problems that we've talked about. So I've just given you like kind of a quick overview of what I'm trying to show you. All right, so I have deleted everything in our stage logging process. I'm going to publish this. And the first thing that I want to show you is logging in a loop. So this could be logging a loop that's going over a collection, or it could just be a manual loop. So in this case, I'm going to do a manual loop. I'm going to use a decision stage, and let's call this loop again, question mark. I'm going to end up creating two data items. We're going to call one loop limit in all caps. And I actually want to say loop counter less than loop limit. Okay, let's go ahead and create those data items here. Loop limit. I'm going to make this a number. I'm going to default it to 0. And copy it. We'll call this one loop counter. I'll default that to 0 as well. And then what I want to do is make an input parameter. We're going to call this loop limit. And every time we run this, we're actually going to provide how many we want it to do. So let's go loop limit here. You know what? I guess we could just limit it to we'll do 10. We are going to have to increase that by a whole bunch though. Okay, so should we loop again? Is loop counter less than loop limit? Then we will loop again. We're going to increment the value. So we want to switch this actually. Loop, whoops, loop. Okay, I've got my caps lock backwards. Loop counter +1. I'll name this loop counter +1. Store this into loop counter. And then I'll grab an anchor like this. All right, so what we should get if I start stepping is it should loop 10 times or so. I might have it might actually loop 11 times. No, I think it did 10 times. Okay, so that looks good. Check for errors, missing link. What do I have? Oh, I have a page 1. Let's just delete this. We can come back. I'm probably going to end up creating subpages and testing that out. But let's just test something simple. Okay, what I want to show you is kind of two things at once. Let's look at looping this and see what it looks like in the session log when you have the logging enabled and when you don't have the logging enabled. So I'm actually going to just copy this. And we're going to paste it like this. Let's make that look a little better. Okay, I'm going to make a decision so that I can run this one way or the other. So this is going to be log in loop, question mark, log in loop. We will copy this and make it an input parameter. Make this a flag. Okay, let's set this farther away. Okay, so these are our input parameters. Let's see, log in loop yes versus log in loop no. All right, so in the log, let's make this a little easier to read, I think. Like this. Okay, so log in loop yes, we will come down here and we'll leave the decision stage set to stage logging is enabled. But in this log in loop no, we're going to set this to errors only. And let's just make sure that the others are also set to errors only. Yep. And then this decision, we can leave this one logging. That's fine. So we could always check the session log and see how it, what it did. We also want the start stage to be set to enabled so we can see what these input parameters values are. And I don't care about the end stage. So we'll go ahead and we'll leave that enabled so I can just at least see a line. Okay, let's check for errors. Okay, looks good. We should test this. Let's make the default for login loop set to false. Yeah, that way by default, it won't fill up our session log. I'm going to reset and let's step Now by default, it's going to go no path, and here it's going to loop, but what we'd expect is that the session log won't show this stage because it's set to errors only, and this isn't running into any errors. This one over here, though, we're expecting it will, so let's step, and then we'll change the current value of login loop to true, and it should go down this way, and we just want to make sure that it does actually end. Okay, so it does. We don't want any infinite loops. Let's go ahead and save this. Did we publish it? Let's make sure we publish it. Okay, so it is published to control room. Created and published. Now let's go over to control room, and we're going to run this process on my resource. The first time we run it, let's run it with a much higher loop limit. Let's try 10,000, and we are going to log in loop false. So what we'd expect is for there to be no lines in the session log, at least not for the ones inside the loop. So let's start. See how long this takes. It should be pretty fast. Okay, it's already done. So double clicking on that to look at the session log. So in the session log, this is what you see. We got the start stage, and we have the start stage's parameters. We inputted loop limit 10,000 and login loop false. So then it got to login loop. It saw that it was false, and then it went on the false path, and then it went to it, did its thing and then end. So we don't see anything in between. Now, let's see what happens when we run it again. This time, let's say 10,000 again, and login loop true. How long do you think this is going to take? 5 hours? No, I'm kidding. It should take longer because logging makes it take longer. Okay, it's done now. So it looks like it, before when we did the stage logging turned off, except for those like 3 stages, and it wasn't logged in a loop. Looks like it took 1 second, or maybe that's even less than 1 second. And then we looped 10,000 times in both of these. This one with the stage logging turned on inside of the loop, it took 9 seconds. So 41 seconds there, 50 seconds. It took 9 seconds for it to run. So 1 second versus 9 seconds. And I'll show you why that is. Let me open it up. Because it had to log 11 pages of logs. It did that in 9 seconds, okay? I don't know how much data this is. This is probably not that much data, but it's certainly logging far more data to the database than it needs to. I'm going to click this to go to the beginning of the list of pages. And then I'm scrolled up to the top here. So you could already see that it's pretty easy to tell when something is in a loop. Whenever you see decision true, decisions true, decision true, decision true, and there's nothing else to help you even understand what's going on. I mean, you have the name of it right here, but you see nothing helpful in all of here. This is something that's logged in a loop and is not helpful at all. So sometimes you might want to log in a loop. There might be a reason for that. But in this case, it's not helping us at all. It doesn't mean anything to me. So we don't even know like what the count is at this point. Yeah, okay, we're looping again, but we don't know. What are we at this point? Are we at 10 or 5,000? So there's that. And then up here, you can still see like our helpful information, but now we just have pages. And I'm scrolling right now. I know it doesn't look like I'm scrolling, but I'm scrolling. Now let's look at logging collections. I'm going to go back over to stage logging process. And I'm going to create a you know what? I think we could use the collection manipulation tool. I just said collection manipulation tool, but I meant object collection. Okay, so older versions of Blue Prism don't have that search functionality, but this is here now. Wait, has that always existed? No, that hasn't always existed, right? So I'm going to go and choose utility collection manipulation, which is a standard VBO that's offered by Blue Prism. If you don't have that, you should go to the Digital Exchange and download the core VBOs. So I'm going to go in here and just choose one of these actions that will take a collection as an input. Let's do collection contains field. Yeah. And then what I'm going to do is pass in an input collection. So we'll call this like input collection. And the field we want to check for is something. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to go create a collection now. We'll call this input collection. And I think I will actually create a field called something. And then we'll add something else, flag something else more, and then a number. In the initial values, I'm just going to click add bunch. We don't need data necessarily in all these, but I'm just going to do this just so I can see it. And then we'll choose like true for some of these and false for some of them. And then something else, we'll just do some numbers. Like this. Okay. Now I'm going to click OK. So this is a multi-row collection. It's got 12 rows in it. Every time I call this, it is going to log into the session log if I have the logging turned on for this. So log in loop, let's say yes here. Okay. I've got the input collection going into it, and there is an output, but I don't know that I really care about that. I guess I could just output that. We'll output an error message too if there's anything there, but there shouldn't be. And let's see, we want to turn the logging on. So by default, the stage logging is set to errors only. I'm going to change it to enabled just to show you what that looks like. I'm going to copy this and put it over here. And then in this one, where we're not logging, I'm going to change it to stage logging. We could do errors only, and that's fine. Check for errors. There's no errors. I am going to step through this just to make sure that it appears to work properly. So it should say collection contains field, and it passes that collection into the action. The action checks to see if it's there and returns success of true. And then it's going to loop and just do this over and over again. Okay. Save this as the added collection manipulation with bad logging in loop. Save. And now let's go back over. Let's run the same test again. So I'm going to drag this over here, drop it. Start selected. So here I am going to put a loop limit of, we'll do like, dare I do 100? I'm going to do 100. And we're going to say login loop false, just to do the same initial test as we did before. This should go pretty fast. Okay, it's done already. We're going to open this up and just make sure, okay, yeah, so we did set the logging properly. It's logging our parameters at the beginning and doing login loop, determining, what the value was of that, and then end. I'm going to run this one more time. And now we're going to change it to loop limit of still 100 though. Log in loop true. So this is going to log our decision stage. And wait, did I say to log the parameters of that action stage? I actually don't remember. We'll find out. But I think it is still set to log the parameters as well. All right, so that took what, 3 seconds? This one took 3 seconds. So the time, there was not really a time difference that we could tell here. This is where I was saying, like, the difference in speed is really only noticed when you get in the tens of thousands of loops. So I'm going to double click here to open up the log. All right, there's only one page of logs, but you can see that each time it's doing this, it's logging loop again, true, loop again, true, loop again, true, which is what we saw before. But then we're also seeing this collection manipulation action. Collection contains field. Its input parameter is being logged. So you can click this and you can see the entire collection in here. Oh, actually just like my heart skipped a beat a little bit when I saw that because I opened it up and there was a ton of stuff in here. It just, it's, doesn't it make your skin crawl to see like the whole collection being logged in the session log? Oh my, yeah. Another way that you can view this is you can go export entire log. You can choose HTML file. I'm going to export this into C:\test\other, and then we'll name it BPA complete session log. Next, it's going to export the entire log, and then I'll go look at that. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to open up BPA complete session log. And here is the session log in HTML. And this is where like it's kind of like a little bit easier to tell that it's logging collections, because instead of the stage names here, like going from one stage to the next, and there being one line in the session log for each stage, it's got like in for all the input parameters. So it's kind of like logging a separate line for every row of that collection, which gets to be excessive. And you scroll down. I'm going to scroll down really quick. You could see how many lines really are in that session log if you split it out to include the extra lines being added by the collection. And this was just looping 100 times. Imagine if it was a lot more. This would be insane. So you have to be very careful about making sure that you don't log those. So what we do is go back over to the process. We would identify which stages were causing the problem. In this case, we know it's these two. So we might select both of these and go edit selected stages and do log errors only or disable logging, depending on what we need. And then that would solve the problem. So I could definitely go into even more detail. I feel like it's maybe a little unnecessary, and I feel like I've already kind of gone a little too deep into this topic. Let me know if for some reason you'd like to see me go even more in depth into this. Let me know specifically what you'd like to know about, though, because I tried to kind of go over what I think is most important, and my outline for this video, it has actually more stuff that I skipped because I felt like it was too much. So let me know what you think. In the end, it's up to you how you handle your stage logging, your session logging. That's like totally up to you. But you want to make sure that you're not destroying your database, and then you're also giving yourself enough information to troubleshoot with. That's always what it comes back to. So you always want to ground yourself in that whenever you're deciding, should I log this or should I not? Even though this is not all I have to say about this topic, I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.